Well, we're back with the dark vines eating my balcony. Um, but yeah, we're back, and I would like to talk about a genre that is not that widespread, or at least it hasn't solidified as much as many other genres. But you do see it, and it fascinates me, perhaps because it's not as solidified, and that means that there is still a lot of room to define it, and a lot of room to almost almost a push to experiment with it. It's basically fantasy cyberpunk again, but this time the cyber is not exchanged for magic. So it's not mana punk. Instead, it's exchanged for common craftsmanship that gets taken to a whole new level. That means that smiths and fletchers and woodworkers or carpenters and like are taken to another level. It's not about the same revolutions in technology that took us from the medieval ages to the Renaissance. In fact, it's better to imagine that the Renaissance never happened, but technologies as they were continued to improve and advance. So, what you got is very advanced machinery powered by animals or water wheels or windmills or the like, or even by human powers. You have bladed weapons like axes and spears and swords that are not just of extremely high quality, but also become advanced in almost ridiculous ways. One of my favorites was swords that have all these neat features that you usually see in artistic swords, but these are made in a way that explain them, that justify them. The kind of the swords with the with serrated edges, for example, which would be usually not something you'd use. Swords that are curved in funny ways, or swords that are impossibly thin. All of these things are made practical by improved craftsmanship, and you can have swords that can be changed around so that your short sword can be snapped open in a way that makes it a long sword or something like that. An axe that becomes a shield. All these kinds of extreme advancements on technologies that in our real historical timeline started to fall out of fashion because of things like flintlock pistols and cannons. But here, all of these old technologies are given new life by advancing them extremely. And there are similarities to cyberpunk in many ways, um, beyond just the mere concept of it, because like fantasy, we're still rooted in the Middle Ages. It should be said that Bladepunk can, yeah, that's what I'm calling the genre. I don't know if I mentioned that because some of the most visible elements of it are advanced bladed weapons. Um, but yeah, Bladepunk can actually be done without magic at all because it's about the advancements in normal technology. This could either be because simply magic doesn't exist and it's more of a break from a historical Middle Ages kind of genre. Sorry. Or it can simply be because technology, craftsmanship. I should probably call it craftsmanship, more than technology. Craftsmanship got so advanced that magic simply wasn't the best choice anymore. It fell out of favor because suddenly technologies could do all the things needed, and mass production would likely be a big part of it. It's not quite as with cyberpunk where everybody has access to incredibly powerful stuff. There's going to be more a peasant class because it still has those roots, but there will be a class of very powerful people who are not the people in actual power running around with all these gadgets and all of these special skills. The skill part could be a part of it too, like having martial arts introduced into a medieval setting and perhaps even advanced beyond what we normally think of as martial arts because you have new gadgetry that they can use. Maybe they have special swords that are useful for special assassin things. I don't really have an example right off the cuff, but yeah, things that could exist without the technological revolutions we know from our own history could be taken to a whole new level, and they could make magic unnecessary if it existed at all. But cyberpunk actually draws a lot from the medieval social mindset in that you have very powerful, undisputed rulers, kings in the medieval evil mindset, CEOs in the cyberpunk mindset. So there is already this kind of undisputed power faction. But there are still rivals to it, just like there are rivals to CEOs. And in Bladepunk, it would be much the same as in Manapunk. It would be trade houses, it would be guilds, it would be thieves guilds, which are, I guess, guilds as well, but criminal organizations like that. It would be local barons and the like. The power struggle gets more densely populated and thus more vicious. And with all the technology available, it can easily get very bloody too. The sprawl that is a part of cyberpunk and that was also a part of manapunk is a bit harder to justify because it would take very different technologies to make that work. But having cities with advanced sewers or having new ways to build, or if it still is actual fantasy, having dwarves build cities in the mountains that get inhabited by human or maybe get captured by humans, and elves doing the same in the forests and the trees, and merfolk in the sea maybe, all opens up opportunities. But you can't just hand wave it and say that huge, for the time being, megacities are created by advanced building materials and building techniques. It's not impossible, but it will likely need to have more explanation than simply build higher, build denser, because medieval architecture is not meant to work in that way. And the idea that everything is built out of stone in order to even stand upright is probably going to push it a bit. But there are many possibilities, and a lot of actual historical building techniques from the Middle Ages and even before can be used. Rome had fairly dense building, fairly dense population quarters, and if you assume that the Roman building techniques never quite fell out of style, those would have advanced as well. So it's not impossible. It just needs some more thought than simply magic did it or technology did it, because it's not quite that kind of technology unless you define it first. But for the story part of it, a lot of it will be fantasy cranked up to 11. It will be fantasy with a cyberpunk mentality and with a lot of innovative and interesting gadgetry. And a lot of adventures will likely be centered around power struggles between the aforementioned kings, trade houses, guilds, and the like. But like Mana Punk, there is also still the notion of finding ancient artifacts. But since the magic is not that central, the ancient artifacts will be a different kind of animal. It might be that someone 100 years ago figured out a way to solve a problem, and that solution was locked away somewhere or lost. It will not be, or likely not be, that there is some very powerful item somewhere, and the first who gets it gets a lot of power, which could happen in Manapunk. It will not be the same in Bladepunk. Bladepunk is more centered around rational extremes more than fantastic extremes. But the archaeology part can still be used. It can also be used for things that are not in themselves powerful but are symbolically powerful, like some religious artifact that a religious cult is obsessed with and a lot of people believe in, and the first to find it will get some sway over this religion, which could be a powerful religion. It can be heraldry, uh, the whole family bloodline things. It could be evidence of tampering with a bloodline, hiding true heirs to power, stuff like that. And the truth is found in an old book or in some old tapestry or carved into walls or something like that. So the possibilities are still there, and the idea of ancient empires can still play an important role, like it does in both fantasy and manapunk and other fantasies, many other fantasy subgenres. But it will not be the same as in manapunk with just powerful artifacts, unless it's both bladepunk and manapunk, which is maybe pushing it a bit. But parts of the world could be less magical and lean towards bladepunk instead. I'm working around that with that idea. So that's definitely a possibility. But yeah, an intensified fantasy or medieval world with a lot of the cyberpunk mentality and with blacksmiths mass producing all kinds of weapons and tools, so that finding a powerful, or not powerful, I should be careful with that word, finding a high quality or very useful tool is not the same difficult task it is in typical fantasy, and especially in historical medieval fiction. Most people will have a lot more access to a lot more things, even if the really powerful things are still more for those who have a special need for them, and for those in power who have a special need for them. So yeah, I like the notion of Bladepunk, despite or because of its lack of a solidified genre description. It's a concept in many ways, but I like the concept, and I think it has a lot of possibility. So it can be a very interesting genre to work in, I believe.